Welcome to the last lesson in our grammar series in the Take 5 5-week study plan. Previously, we covered how verbs change in English grammar through conjugation and verb forms like gerunds and infinitives. In this lesson, we will take a look into the subject and objects of those verbs. That means we answer who or what performs this action and who or what receives the action, given the active form of the verb. It will be reversed if the verbs are in passive form. There are two cues that we can use to ensure such subject-verb agreement, which are modifiers and pronouns references. First, modifiers are used to add in details for a noun in the sentence. Depending on what the noun is, the verb forms in the modifier will have to agree accordingly. Let's look at these two examples. The first sentence subject is the baker, and the main verbs shape and season are conjugated in past simple tense to agree with this subject. The dough is the object of this sentence or the receiver of such shape and season actions. If we reverse this first sentence into passive form, the object, the dough, now becomes the subject, and we have to change the main verbs into passive form while keeping the past simple tense. In such a passive sentence, we still call this the baker as the object grammatically, but we understand that this is the one who performs the action while the subject is the receiver. Let's say we use the same modifiers even though the subjects of the sentence are different. This will violate the rule of correct modifier. The verb form has to agree with the subject to which this modifier is adding information. So if the first subject is the baker, the modifier's verb has to also follow the active verb form because he is performing this beat and deflate action just like shape and season. So the modifier has to be after beating and deflating, or the gerund forms just like reduced relative clause. On the other hand, if the dough is a subject, but it is in fact receiving the action beat and deflate, the modifier also has to take the passive form, just like shape and season here. So, being beaten and deflated are correct in this case because the combination of a to be verb and a past participle verb like this agrees with such passive form of was shaped and was seasoned. Or this being is parallel to was to show the agreement of the same subject, the dough. Placement of modifiers will show you what they are adding information to. In this example, notice that the modifier is just like a reduced relative clause made of gingerbread. But if it is placed right after the local bakery, like the first sentence, it means that this is a modifier or added relative clause for this local bakery. While in the second sentence, it will be the modifier for a house. With what we know from the previous lesson, this is a type 2 reduced relative clause, or it is reduced to a past tense because the original form is a passive action. So the first one is incorrect because the local bakery actively performed the making while a house is actually made of gingerbread. So the first one is incorrect because of the placement of modifier, and moving it to right after a house, like the second sentence, is correct. So you may not need to change the verb forms of modifier, you can just change the position of it if you understand the use of modifiers correctly. Another way to fix a wrong modifier without changing the verb forms or the placement is to make this modifier into a clause by adding the right subject. Let's take a look at this example, which might be tricky to understand for English as the second language students. We see that the subject our lives will not be able to perform the action, watch the end of the world. The only one who can watch the end of the world is we, not our lives. Well, it's simply because our lives don't have the eyes to do that. So this modifier is incorrect. If it takes the gerund form like a type 1 reduced relative clause for active action like this. So we can correct this by adding the right subject we for this action and conjugate correctly. Not gerunds anymore. It will be past continuous tense to show the context or background for the main action. Our lives flashed before our eyes. Revise lesson 4 or the first grammar lesson if you confuse when to use past continuous tense. By doing this, we don't have to change the main subject nor change the position of the modifier. You can tell that this modifier is wrong because it is a type 2 reduced relative clause by the past participle verb spotted, indicating that the police was spotted dealing cocaine, which doesn't make sense. It should be the drug dealers who received this action or who were spotted. So we can change this by switching to the right subject of this modifier or the drug dealers. But this also means we need to change the main verb to passive form as well to ensure correct verb form since they are the receivers of the action arrest as well. Or you can also move the modifier closer to the right person this information is added to, the drug dealers. Technically become a relative clause. Since this is at the end of the sentence, it is recommended to keep the full form instead of the shortened form to avoid confusion. So we keep the full passive form and connect it to the drug dealers with the relative pronoun who. This might take some practice to reverse from the modifier or reduce relative clause back to the original because it might not be as intuitive as the other way around like we covered in the previous lesson. This is a more advanced example where you might not notice that modifiers and the main subjects don't agree. The main subject is the taste of this dish, which cannot be cooked and seasoned. You can only cook and season the food itself, not the taste of it. So this is not just passive or active action, but it is the wrong receiver of this cook and season action. So we can change the subject to just the dish, ketchup-covered octopus. Notice that we still need to have the description revolting for the taste of this dish. So we have to manipulate this into this dish had a revolting taste instead to ensure grammatical correction and full information. Or we can move the modifier closer to the right object, the ketchup-covered octopus. This is more lenient as we don't require it to follow right after the noun phrase. It is okay to stay here as it is still understood that the subject of this modifier is the closest noun, which is still this ketchup-covered octopus. The second cue to ensure that we have the right subject for the sentence is to check whether the pronouns are referring correctly to the previous nouns. In this example, the first sentence has the subject he, which is incorrect because this pronoun does not correctly refer to the previous names. There are two people, and now we do not know which one is being talked about in this he pronoun. So to correct this, we refer to both of them with the subject they and change the conjugated verb eat accordingly. In this example, we are referring to one defined third party because this a student is in singular form. The pronoun they is incorrect. We change it to he and safely add or she just because we don't know the gender of this student and conjugate the main verb accordingly. In this case, the pronoun they come in without no previously defined nouns. This is also incorrect because we do not know who found a pile of cash. So we cannot use a pronoun in this case, and hence the correct way is to keep the full noun like the inspectors here. Not only nouns are referenced, verbs are also referenced in pronouns. These three examples use different pronouns reference when referring to a verb. They are all grammatically correct, but the ambiguity level will be slightly different, which might affect when this first sentence conveys multiple actions. The first sentence used this, which is short and concise, usually seen in informal speech, and it implies the action deleting. But if the previous sentence has multiple action like my teammate deleted my part of the essay and added something else, we would not know what particular action is being confronted if we use this. The second use this deletion, which is less ambiguous. we are questioning directly the action deleting. It works well even in cases of multiple actions in the previous sentence. The last one asks with even more clarity and has the least ambiguity when referring. We are not just referring to what action being confronted, we also know what particular thing about this action is being discussed. So it depends on the complexity of the previous sentence and the intention of the reference. We might need to choose different pronouns reference. One particular pronoun can be used differently than other pronouns. It can be used as a dummy subject or expletive placeholder, meaning that no real person or thing performs the action, filling a required subject slot, especially for time, weather, distance, or existence. Another pronoun you can see in this category is there. However, it also works as a pronouns reference, and we want to discuss some cases when it is being used correctly as a pronouns reference. Like in this example, the pronouns reference it as the object of the sentence is used incorrectly because we don't have any singular noun in the previous part for it to refer to. The receiver of the action drop has to be beer bottles, which is a plural noun. So we can only use the pronouns them to avoid repeating such phrase beer bottles. Correct way of using it as a pronouns reference will be when we have a singular object to refer to, like the senior class here. Even though the class has multiple people, we refer to it as a singular noun, so there is incorrect. An infamously confusing object to find the right pronouns reference in the SAT is the term every, like everyone in this example. Remember that everyone is always a singular noun. So not only the main verb has to be conjugated accordingly. In this case, if this wish is placed in present tense, it has to be wishes. But the pronoun referencing to everyone has to be he and not they as well. Remember to change the possessive pronouns that follow. Demonstrative pronouns like this, that, these, and those are also frequently used to point at or refer to previously defined objects. In this case, the chairs made by this company are being referred to, so we have to use the plural pronouns, which is those and not that. We only use these or these for objects that are very close by, and use that or those to refer to distant objects. In this case, we are talking about a general type of chair produced by a brand, so it is understood as distant. Let's put all of these together to solve some real SAT questions. Quickly take a look at the answers. We know that the difference of these answers boiled down to choosing the right subject. This is the cue to quickly navigate the right knowledge to apply. You are not asked to conjugate verbs or find the right verb forms. You are asked to check for the right subject by looking for modifiers or pronoun reference. So the modifier's verb based is in past participle form. So the subject that shares this modifier has to be a story or an event and cannot be a military leader like answer B and D. Answer A has a dummy pronoun there, which is incorrect because you cannot use this pronoun as the subject of the past action based on events. The only correct answer, therefore, is A. The answers of this question tells you to find the right pronouns references, either singular or plural, as well as either as a subject or as a possessive pronoun. We see that the main verb of the sentence is were, so we know the subject has to be plural. And since findings show this plural form, we can only put a possessive pronoun here and not something like a subject and a verb like they are. Make sure to check again if this pronouns reference is correct by looking at the previous part to ensure the correct reference. We see that their findings here has to refer to the findings of Jim Watson and Francis Crick, so it is in fact correct. This example asks you about reflexive pronouns, which is used as the object when the receiver and the performer of an action are the same. Like, I bought myself a gift. Slowly scan for this action attached here, and we know that the performer of this action is they, which we need to check for the referenced object previously. These pronouns refer to the closest plural noun, so turtle barnacles. So the turtle barnacles use the secretions to attach whom to a sea turtle shell. Obviously, they have to attach themselves. Other pronouns references like it or them will not refer to anything else, so they are incorrect answers. If D is correct, then the subject also has to be it as well. In this example, to be able to find the right subject that agrees with the modifier, we need to see who can recover 2 years later, because this gerund form means that this is an active action or the subject performed this recover action. The only fitting answer would be King Henry himself, or answer A. The rain and Henry's rain are the same, and both are incorrect because they cannot be the subject of the modifier's verb recover. Similarly, it as a dummy pronoun cannot perform this action either, so D is incorrect. Apply the same method in this example. Ask yourself what subject owns the characteristic of being cheap, versatile, and easy to produce. It cannot be problems, so any answer like B and C are incorrect because both use problems as the main subject. A used the dummy pronoun there, which indicates the existence, but then it violates the agreement for the modifier's verb be, as there doesn't perform this action. Hopefully, after 3 grammar lessons, you are now confident to ace all the standard English convention questions in the SAT. Don't forget to finish the quiz and homework in the study plan, as well as practice on the domain practice, and track your overall progress in terms of score and timing with mock exam practice.